Hype Man, Raj Nation, the GOAT to market. From Hype HQ in Chicago, Illinois, Startup Hype Man presents the GOAT to Market Show. What's up, everyone? I am your host, Raj Nation, the founder and chief pitch artist of Startup Hype Man. This podcast is where we bring you founders, company leaders, and creatives who are building it, who are doing it, who have been there and done that. And they pull back the curtain on their go-to-market strategies so that you can build a venture that you love and become the GOAT of your industry. Want first listen on episodes before anyone else? Subscribe to our newsletter at startuphypeman.com. You will get alerts every Sunday morning when we release new episodes. All right, let's hear how today's guest is becoming the GOAT. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone out of Buffalo, New York, he is the CEO of Alleyoop and the host and CEO of the Do Hard Things podcast. Please welcome Gabe Lullo.
I love it. This is awesome, man. I feel like I'm ready to rip my shirt off here. It's like the ultimate warrior back in the day. I'm dating myself, but that's incredible, man. That's incredible.
Like I said, he's Gabe Lullo. He is the founder and CEO of Alleyoop. He's also the CEO and the host of the Do Hard Things podcast. What is Alleyoop? Alleyoop is that assist that you need as you are growing your company, specifically around sales development. They are helping clients and setting them up for success with SDR teams and doing so at scale for the fast growth startup who's ready to start not just going to market, but actually expanding themselves in market, or as we like to say on this show, becoming the GOAT to market. They've worked with tons and tons of startup teams. They have in total pulled off 11 million cold calls per year. They've got 170 fractional SDRs working on their floor on behalf of other companies. They've worked with over 1,600 founders over a 16-year period, and been the founding SDR team at some of the biggest names you have heard of today. It's no wonder they are called Alleyoop. Gabe, first off, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Our topic today is making it nearly impossible for your sales hire to fail. Why is this on your mind, and why is this important to you?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm a huge fan of yours, and thank you so much for those kind words. I appreciate it. Saying those numbers back, it's kind of hard to believe. You know, we started this when, I joined the company over a decade ago, and there's 6 people on the sales floor, and we just landed the ZoomInfo account, and it was a startup company, and we were like, okay, what are we trying to do here? And to see what's happened over the years, we're very humble and grateful about it. But we're in the people business, and what we do is we hire best-in-class salespeople and level them up, and put them into really cool companies to serve as their SDR function. So, our widget, our algorithm, our raw materials is salespeople. We're a professional service provider, so hiring and attracting and selecting, and then most importantly, to your point, enabling and supporting and training is paramount for us to have the success we need to have to serve our clients correctly.
We're going to talk a whole lot more about how Alleyoop has gone about this, both for themselves and on behalf of others. Before we get there, Gabe, I want to learn a little bit more about you and your background. Now, okay, with the name of Alleyoop, there is obviously a basketball metaphor here. So assuming that is accurate, who is your team? Who is your favorite all-time player? And what position on the floor do you personally most identify with?
Well, I know you're from Chicago. I'm actually from Buffalo, but the Bulls has always been my team because, I'm old enough to remember the greats, Pippen and Jordan working together. My cousin would say it has to be Jordan. I'd say I like Scottie Pippen because the behind the scenes kind of guy. I think we've always, it relates to our company too, right? We don't like being the star. We're not the recognition. We're the ultimate assist. Our job is to not slam dunk or, have our name in lights. Our job is to put it perfectly where it needs to be, the ball itself. And that's our mantra. And you're right, Alleyoop is a basketball term, and we take that term more than just the name of our analogy, right? From the SDR to the AE function, which everyone gets. But it's really about bringing that sports mentality to the entire sales floor. Having friendly competition, having head coaches, having assistant coaches. We literally name these titles internally within our team. Our managers are the coaches, our directors are the head coaches. So it is a mantra, if you will, or at least a theme within the company internally as well. I would say, I don't know, I'd probably, like I said, I like Scottie Pippen, so I'd probably go with that. But yeah, that's just how I feel about it.
When you said, well, I'm from Buffalo, I thought the second part of that sentence was going to be, so the Buffalo Braves, of course, of like the 1960s.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's actually funny. I know that the family that actually owned the Braves, the Snyders, and
Wow.
Here in Buffalo, it's a big name and good friends of mine. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to see. Sports in Buffalo has been amazing. Of course, Bills fan. I grew up in Orchard Park as well, so big Bills fan as well. Not to switch sports on you, but yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your time spent growing up.
Yeah.
A lot of people's first foray into entrepreneurship isn't necessarily like the real company they start. It's something like a lemonade stand, or like for me, I think I was like hawking Pokemon cards on behalf of a friend. Do you recall what your first, whether it was like legitimate or not, what your first business was?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It wasn't an exact business, but it was a very unique story that was a massive differentiator for me in my trajectory in life. And, with all those long words that I just said, here's the scenario. I grew up in Buffalo. People in Buffalo know this. Most people know this. It's a very blue collar town. I had an uncle that worked at the Ford stamping plant and literally, built cars. I had another cousin who was a cook in an Italian restaurant and came home smelling like fish at 3 a.m. And I had another cousin of mine who literally, did roofs and was like, fell off a roof and hurt his back and then, couldn't work for 2 years. So growing up, I was around these amazing people, but very different than what I do today. And I was 11 years old. So here's the story. I was 11 years old, and we had to raise money for the local fundraiser for the aquarium. The aquarium needed money. So they got all the school districts together to say, okay, kids, we need to raise money to save the aquarium. And they had this really ugly, weird, crooked printed t-shirt that we had to go sell. And I was 11 years old, and I sold more t-shirts than every other kid, not only in my school, but the entire school district in the region of where I live. I was able to convince my uncle to buy 11 $20 really shitty t-shirts, right? So when that happened, I said, oh my God, I can talk and make money. This is incredible. And so that was like my aha moment, that I didn't have to lift heavy things. I didn't have to smell like fish. I didn't have to break my back literally at work. And all I had to do was figure out, I can use my words to actually generate revenue. That was mind blowing for me. And that's how I got started, if you will, at a young age.
I like that. And I think a lot more people are innately salespeople, whether they associate with being one or not. But I do think that is like everyone's first real. It's almost like the process of making friends when you're young is in some sort of way enacting sales skills, right?
Yeah. And the big influence, speaking of family, was my mom. My dad passed away when I was very young. So my mom was extremely involved in my life, really living both roles of parents. And she was a school teacher, right? So she put herself through school. My dad died really young, when I was really young, tragically. So she put herself through school, raising 2 kids as a single mom. So I learned grit and hard work, and doing hard things is actually her mantra she taught me as a kid. But she was a bartender and put herself through her master's degree of English, and then became a school teacher and taught high school English for 40 years, and now is retired. But she taught me the gift of communication and the gift of words. And she said I would always be a great teacher. And I said, well, that's literally what I do. I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, and that's what sales people are all about, right? Turning around and teaching prospects, right, why their solution is great, and educating the market is a huge piece of sales. And then being a sales manager is turning around and teaching your team how to do what you do and done successfully. So I think being a teacher, and of course I was very competitive with my sports background, and was money motivated as well because I didn't grow up with money. So being money motivated, being highly competitive, and then having this teacher type role in my life was a recipe for, I think, a born salesperson.
So let's kind of formalize it. That's an incredible story too with your mom, from like bartending to pay for an MBA, like or a master's rather. That's wild. And I can see how much of that obviously drafted off onto you in the process. So this idea of teaching in a different, classroom, if you will, how did you go from, well, I could do whatever I want to, well, I'm going to start a company that, that is focused on sales development? What's the story of Alleyoop's creation?
Yeah, so I started off in recruitment. So I started in the recruiting role, which is, of course, sourcing great people. So I figured out how to be a good recruiter. And then it turned into more of a training role because I started really teaching people how I was doing what I was doing. And I do want to mention this, that, a lot of people say, well, your top producers are your next leaders. I totally disagree with that. I remember firing 8 years ago our number one producer on our sales floor out of 80 people. And everyone thought I was nuts. But the reason why I did it, he was just an asshole. I mean, he was self-serving. He had a big ego. He showed up late. He took 2-hour lunches. And when people asked him for help, he just brushed them off. And he thought he owned the place. And yeah, he was a good salesperson, but he wasn't a great leader, and he wasn't a great manager or teacher. So I think there's a huge piece of that. So I realized, I was a good producer when I was an individual contributor, but I also had this knack of teaching people just, naturally on how I was doing what I was doing. And people started coming up to me for questions. And that was an easy progression into leadership. And then I saw this opportunity where the sales development role was becoming a thing in the SaaS business, right? Full cycle sales was pretty much all that companies did. And then we saw, okay, with demos and with selling software that was more, less hands-on, if you will, than a physical product, or having to knock on doors or going into offices and, traveling here to there to do a sales demo, with remote sales being a thing and software sales being a thing back 10, 15 years ago, we saw this SDR function really starting to be an idea, and we just doubled down on it. And that's how we were able to create Alleyoop.
It's interesting you say like the common logic is your top producer is automatically your next leader, because, sometimes that can be the case.
Sure.
But many times, and perhaps more times, they're so good at that, they don't necessarily have the leadership, abilities in them, or it's either not their skill set or also not their interest either. And it reminds me of, to go off on a little bit of a tangent here and coming back to the basketball stuff, a friend of mine from college, he personally is bad at basketball, at the sport of playing basketball, but he understands the game really, really well. And he is great at like building community and bringing people together. And he's good at coaching. You would think you have to be like a stud player to be a coach, but again, like, you pass him the rock and like he'll like dribble a little bit and you're going to be like, what is this guy doing? Like, he has no business on a basketball court. But because of the other qualities that he has, he basically like pursued various leadership roles within basketball after graduation. He ended up becoming the president of basketball operations at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. And then since then has held associate head coaching roles at 4 different Division I universities. Most recently, over the last year or so, he's the associate men's coach at UIC here in Chicago. And that to me is a sports example of exactly what you're saying, where it's not by default that just because someone is good at the doing, that they're also good at the leading and the management side of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that old saying of like, if you can't do, teach, I don't believe that is always the best either when it comes to sales leadership, right? Here's my approach on it. Just because you're a great individual contributor doesn't mean you'd be a manager, but managers should be great individual contributors, right? You
Yeah,
should be good at the thing that it is you're teaching to be a good teacher, but it's not required that every single person who's good at it should be a teacher. That's the
sure.
approach.
Yeah.
And so, when you look at the coaches of any sport, right, sometimes they're not the most healthy, athletic looking people, but they're amazing people when it comes to inspiration and strategy. Moneyball is a great, a great movie too, right? If you look at Jonah Hill's character, right, he was the most elite athletic person in the world, but he was the numbers guy and the analytical guy, and he was able to put all those numbers together and say, statistically, this should work. So there's a lot of that too, right? You have to be really looking at the data, and there's incredible data in sales. And so tracking that, understanding that, and then interpreting it into actionable training and items and decisions, I think is very much important as well.
I I have this perennial bone to pick with Moneyball the movie because it's a great movie, don't get me wrong, but there are so many like startups that love to quote like, "Oh, we're the Moneyball for whatever industry," right?
Right.
And I'm like, but what everyone fails to recognize is they still lost in the first round of the playoffs. And also, they had the MVP of the league that year who wasn't even in the movie. They were like, it's all about Scott Hatterberg and his like 275 batting average. But that's always been my bone to pick with Moneyball is they didn't win the World Series or even make it out of the first round of the playoffs. And they also had the best player in the league on their team that conveniently was not talked about.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But just from the theoretical part of it, right?
Yeah. I don't mean I'm not describing your stance.
I got the gut feeling of stuff. Like gut can take you so far.
Yeah.
But to your point, so many startups come to me and show me this amazing presentation of all these analytics, to your point about why they should absolutely dominate the market. And we bring it to market, we start having conversations, and we realize that the market doesn't want your product, right? And so it's hard for CEOs to hear that, especially when that's their baby, but it really is about the market. And so, there are opportunities that we come across all the time that we get excited about, and it looks good on paper. But once you start talking to potential buyers about it, it changes everything, right? So there is, of course, the real world about it as well.
Now, before we get into like the formal like discussion around the hiring process and making sure the hire succeeds, I do want to ask, there are a lot of, let's call them lead gen services out there. And I think the vast majority of them, ironically, are quite bad at generating like their own leads. Like, and I always think like the litmus test is the email I'm getting from you, I wouldn't respond to. Why would I trust you to now send emails on my behalf? What is it that Alleyoop is doing differently that you've been able to have success? Because I'll say a lot of those lead gen services die out after like 3 years because they either don't have a scalable system or they actually can't get success for their customers. So what is it that you have done differently and your team has been able to do differently that's allowed this model to actually work?
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to hack their way through go-to-market. And it is maybe a bigger conversation, but automation is always at the forefront of everyone when it comes to go to market, and it's not for us. We're old school, but I think old school is the new school, if that makes sense. And to say it in one simple sentence, we make 11 million cold calls a year, like you said in my intro. There's over 2,000 lead gen companies, right, in the market. It's huge. You said it's very, very crowded. Most of them are less than 10-person companies. Most of them are in startup mode, and that's great. But 95% of them don't pick up the phone. 95% of them right out of the gates are just email-only automation tools. And we get them all the time. I get them all the time. The fact that I get them all the time is saying a lot right there, that they're sending, the CEO of the biggest
that's terrible targeting
emails to me all day, every day. And they're horrible, right? Where did I go to college? Do you still have spring fling? I'm like, I graduated 20 plus years ago. Like, I don't need to know that. And so when that's happening, to your point, it's of course looks bad. Keep in mind, we're the product of the product, to your point again. So our favorite thing is when we call our home team, just like you would expect, our sports analogy again, our home team are our reps booking meetings for ourselves and our own AEs. And the best, scenario that our AE likes to go into a call is when the person on that call said, I love this call so much that if my SDR sounded like you on the phone, I absolutely want to be your customer. So when we hear that and it goes into a demo, it's a very high close rate. And again, we are a product of the product. Hey, listen, you want us doing exactly what I'm doing to you right now? Yes, I do. Great. Then let's go ahead and talk. That's our approach. And so the cold calling function and the multi-threading that we do and the really customized strategy about how we personalize communication is our big differentiator for sure in the market.
I can tell just in the way you use specific words right there that you have an advanced understanding of this. Like multi-threading is not a word that people who aren't deep into sales even know exists or what it might be talking about. And the fact that that's what you use is also, and not only that it to me indicates you know what you're doing, but also I think that's actually a huge differentiator from a lot of those other providers because they don't multi-thread. And you're right, they do just fire off 10,000. I got one yesterday, to your point about like the spring fling thing. I got one yesterday. The email was, hey, came across you on LinkedIn. Just curious, are you active there? And I'm like, if you came across me on LinkedIn, wouldn't the first thing you would see is my level of activity?
Yeah. I mean, the concept of do hard things is not just a cliche for us. Picking up a phone call and calling someone out
is very hard.
Is very difficult. We do that at scale. We don't do LinkedIn messaging and automation in any form of typing. None of our reps send messages in the form of typing to our prospects on LinkedIn. Why? Because so is everyone else. We use video notes and voice notes. I actually co-created a program to do it for us at a very simpler way than it typically is done. But long story short, we want to do everything that everyone is not. You know, it's twofold, right? The best salespeople in the world don't sound like salespeople, right? And the best way to penetrate someone and connect with someone is to do it differently than everyone else. So we're using phone, so there's multi-channel and multi-threading, right? To your point about terminology. Multi-threading is when you're connecting with multiple buyers within the actually buying group, multiple people. That's multi-threading. Multi-channel is different mediums of communication. So a call, an email, a text, a voice note, a video note. Those are all different ways we can connect with someone. We use it all because, keep in mind, everyone responds differently. And one of the big questions we like to ask is, hey, listen, I just left you a voicemail, I'm shooting you a quick note here on LinkedIn. Not sure what the best way or your preferred method of communication is, but whatever it is, let me know and I'll just go that route. And that's a great way to ask someone. Most people don't say that, and people will be honest about it. And then you just communicate that way. Not everyone is, one channel approached thought on that.
Yeah. And it is crazy, like the level of like, I'm using these air quotes, like trickery people try and use. Like I got one the other day that was like, hey, bumping up my last email. I know Gmail can be crazy, LOL. And I'm like, what does that even mean? What do you possibly mean by Gmail can be crazy, LOL?
Silence is the best form of communication. Let's just say it right there. Like if they're not responding, they're doing it probably by design, right? I love just following up. Friends of Jeremy Miner, he's a great trainer. He's got 1 million followers on Instagram. He's an awesome trainer, but he always says, never say just following up, because everyone else does, and those are the things you just can't do. But you're absolutely right. We get a lot of weird stuff these days.
Yeah. I even tell, my team members, not necessarily that they're focused on sales development, but even for like when we're communicating with clients or anything else, I say like never use the just following up for the reason that you said. It'll be easily ignored.
Yeah.
But also my take is it basically implies you don't deserve their time, or like you basically like lose respect. Like they won't respect you if you're like, I'm bothering you is the baseline of trying to, and I'm like, and they're already our clients. Like you don't like, they should be responding to us. If they haven't, like they need to get back to us. It's not like a please just reply kind of thing.
Yeah. It's the best way to follow up is to just share value. Yeah. Maybe seeing this podcast go live and say, hey man, I really liked your podcast that you had here. And my favorite part was, what you said about multi-threading. I'd love to chat with you about how we have a software tool that allows for multi-threading. And then you send a link to the podcast. Like that's a valuable follow-up, quote unquote, right?
It is amazing. And I want to make this comment, then we'll get into the actual, success and hiring portion of this. But it is amazing how more and more tools come out promising to take the quote unquote lift out of prospecting. And yet the success rate of prospecting has only gone down.
Right. Like I said, everyone's trying to hack their way through it. What is AI? AI is just software, and it's just personalized emails at scale. To me, that's just more spam, more spam, more spam.
Yeah.
And if you just keep spamming your TAM, all pun intended, or rhyme intended, I should say. If you keep spamming your TAM, it's just continually, it's not a good look. And like I said, the biggest thing for us, for anyone who buys, when they say, hey, if you can do what you just did to me, for me, this would be absolutely amazing. And I think prospecting tools specifically need to think about that sentence and ask themselves, hey, would I respond to this? And that's how you look at it.
So as we think about bringing on your first sales hire, what are the characteristics that you tend to see are most common where it's like, now it's go time? Where's the company at, and what type of company are they, and make the case that it makes sense now? Like, this is the stage to do it, but this is not the stage to do it.
To hire SDRs yourself?
To bring on like your first sales hire outside, whether it's internally or outside team?
Yeah, I think the big question you have to ask yourself is, can I support this person correctly? Can I enable this person accurately? Can I give them all the tools and the track to run on and the support needed in order for them to be successful? I think that's the thing that people don't ask, because if you can't do that, they're going to churn. The reality is 62% of new SDRs are not in that position with that company within 12 months. 62%. So, and the big reason why they leave is not because of money. It's not because they aren't like good or they're not motivated. People want to make money, right? But the reality is they don't have a manager. They don't have the right dialer. They don't have data. They're just not getting any support. They feel like they're on an island. So you have to know, like, do I have that capacity, and do I have that enablement? And I think that's number one. And number two is, is it something that's affordable right now? If you look at coming to us, if we offer fractional support, you get, enterprise enablement, even for a fractional rep that startup founders could literally take advantage of, which is a big value to them. But I talk with our clients all the time. What's unique about us, there's only 2 companies in our entire industry out of 2,000 that do this. We're one of them. Is that our clients can actually hire our team. They can bring them in-house. They can transfer them from our team to their team. They can also take all of our data, our vendors, and our tools and bring it into their ecosystem at our price point. So it's a really great way of building versus buying, or buying versus building at that right time.
There's a lot of debate over if your first sales hire should be full cycle, meaning they do the prospecting and they take the meetings and help close the deal, or just focus on the prospecting and then pass it off to maybe the CEO at that point or whoever else on the team. What's your take? Is it just focus on prospecting on day one and that's it?
My approach is that the founder should be the seller. Even the founder who is a coder, developer, and software guy that is the worst salesperson in the world, and they develop the product in their literal code, versus hiring someone to do it for you. When you're a brand new startup mode, like, I recommend getting an SDR and pointing those leads directly to the founder and have them sell the product. Because not only are they going to be able to be the best storyteller and most passionate about it, but they also will be able to know and get the feedback they need in order to make tweaks, pivots, and shift the product wherever it needs to go for the market. We did a campaign with somebody who's a founder. We were putting appointments right on their calendar. In 6 months, his product literally did a 180, completely evolved, and because of all the feedback he heard in the marketplace. So I think, yes, did he get customers? For sure. But did he pivot and tweak his product? Dramatically. And he's significantly better at sharing the vision of his product than any person you would hire and pay a commission to. But I do believe, obviously, you got to scale it out once you get there. But if you're talking inception, that's my recommendation.
I want to ask about the onboarding process then once someone starts. But before we go there, I want to talk to our audience for a second about where you're at in your own growth trajectory, audience? And are you thinking about how to get from that 0 to 1 stage or that 1 to 2 stage? If so, we all know that if you're at that stage, everyone else thinks startup life is all yachts, but that's not at all the case. It's more ramen noodles, it's more bus passes, and it's more, getting that Domino's pizza coupon that makes the pizza only $3 instead of $9. It's a tough life out there, and the people you can trust to do the things for you, that circle becomes smaller and smaller, and really having the right partner becomes so vitally important, particularly in being able to pitch or being able to have the opportunity to pitch, being able to develop and build out your product, and feeling more confident in your scale and your growth trajectory. And that's where my friends at Code Launch come into play. Code Launch is the only startup accelerator that gives you free software development, helps you with your pitch, and gives you a massive stage to pitch on where you can also win real cash and investment from. And they provide all of this without taking any equity or charging a single dollar. So you get elite software development teams, an elite software development team who works directly on either building out your MVP or refining your existing product. Then, because of my partnership with them, you'll work with me to figure out how to pitch it. You will get a stage in front of over 500 people in what's known as a venturetainment showcase, because it is lights, it is camera, it is action. And you will give that pitch in front of that audience, and you will have the opportunity to actually gain investment on site. It is a one-of-a-kind, unique experience. I love Code Launch, and I'm so excited to be partnering with them through 2025 and into 2026 on their traveling pitch circuit. You can find out when the next Code Launch is coming out by going to the unique link that's going to be in this show episode description. That unique link is important because when the next application window opens, if you hit that link and you apply through that, your application is going to jump the line ahead of anyone who just goes to codelaunch.com. So if you want to skip the line and get priority application review, you want to use that unique link that's going to be in this episode show description. It's a great opportunity. We code, you launch. There's nothing like it. Codelaunch.com. But again, hit that unique link that's in this episode description, because you're going to want to have the first alert on when the application periods are out, the new application windows are out, and want to have your application fast-tracked for review. There's Code Launch USA, Code Launch Latam, Code Launch Canada, and the Code Launch World Championships. Make sure you are part of the next Code Launch cycle. Today on Startup Hype Man's Goat to Market show, we've got Gabe Lullo from Alleyoop, and we're talking about how to make it nearly impossible for your sales hire to fail. So Gabe, before the break there, we started to talk about this idea of the onboarding process. And I think this is really, really important, because it's easy to have the mindset that, okay, I'm hiring a salesperson. I hired them, figure it out. And you put it on them. You're like, oh, hey, go through our Google Drive, look at some of the material we've got. Let me know if you have questions. I think we can all blanket say it's probably a bad approach. So what are the things that a company should do? And I want to also bring it back to when you were saying earlier how it is still the founder's job to have that sales call, but they might not be a seller. How do you make sure that the person is successful, not just in getting the meetings, but then doesn't get blamed for oh, you brought me a bad lead, but more so because that founder did not sell properly?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with onboarding and training. I will say this, there's a lot. Here's where I will double down on AI. There is a lot of AI tools that are out there, and I call them sparring partners, where you can actually do role play assessments and trainings with AI bots versus doing them live and messing it up. Just like practice, right? So you're on the court, you're just practicing with AI, and they'll respond to you, and you can turn it up and you can turn difficulty down. It's literally just like a video game. And I think that's a great way to train reps right now. And it's a very efficient and effective way to do it, and to get them going and practice drilling and rehearsing with AI. It's a really cool tool. We use it a lot. Secondly, to my point about enablement, you want to make sure that you have things to say back when people say things. People asked me on a podcast a few weeks ago, Gabe, what's sales in a sentence? And I said, knowing what to say when someone says something. Like that was it. Like that was my sentence, is as quickly as I can explain sales. Now there's a lot more there, but knowing what to say when someone says something. So if someone says something and you know exactly how to respond to that and say something back that's effective to move that call forward, that is what you want to teach. And that is what you want to help and coach and train when you're in the onboarding function with that salesperson. Not everyone knows that, regardless of how successful or skilled they are, because it's, the product specific sometimes. So that is something you want to focus on for sure. To your other question about, how do we know the CEO is good enough? There's a lot of training available. There's fractional CROs, there's fractional, VPs of sales. There's sales trainers that can help level up CEO's ability to sell, especially the ones that may not have that salesman experience or background. And I think that's definitely something to recommend or invest in if it's something that you are struggling with, for sure.
I think another side of this too. So a few months back, I wrote a LinkedIn post, and I think more or less the theme or the title of it was why your first sales hire will fail. And a lot of what I wrote in there was because it was not necessarily like, it was ultimately pointing the finger at the person who has hired them. Like, what I wrote were things like, you're going to have weekly pipeline review meetings with them where you ask them, how's their pipeline doing? But you're never going to ask them, how are they doing? And it was a lot of those kinds of, and I say this from like personal experience. We tend to just want to focus on the output and the results, and we forget that we've hired a human, and that human needs support, needs coaching, and needs guidance. What are some things that you see on the founder side for how they can be that coach role for them, or some semblance of not just like, show me the data and that's the extent of the relationship?
Yeah, I think you need to, to your point, we're in the human business, we're in the people business. And whether you like it or not, people are super complex and have a lot of emotional things going on in the world. And people usually, fall into sales, right? Like I realized at a young age that I wanted to get into business and sales with my 11-year-old story, but not everyone is like that.
Sure.
I always say in my show, like, hey, people don't go to college to become a salesperson. There's usually a journey that got them into this role. And so maybe they're at a time in their life where this is their first gig, or this is something that they're still figuring out. And there's an emotional roller coaster with sales. You're getting punched in the face with negativity every day. Think about it. If you were a boxer and you got punched in the face for work, you get your doctor. You have like literally mandatory doctor checks. Well, you got to be that doctor and check in and say, hey, listen, how are you doing? What's going on? Is everything going on in your personal life? Like, I know it's a little personal, but you got to be that way because people are different. And it's interesting. We see the data, to your point. Like, we'll watch data and we'll see things dip and we'll wonder, like, okay, is it the messaging? Is it the product? Is it the data? Nope, it's their mindset, right? And we got to figure that out and ask those questions. Here's a question I asked everybody, literally everyone in my company, my family, my daughter, my everyone I ask it all the time. Everyone knows me for it. Are you happy? And I ask it all the time. And the reason why I ask it all the time is not everyone's happy all the time. And so we have to figure out, okay, what may be going on? And it's okay not to be happy. Some people are like, why do you keep asking me that? It's okay not to be happy. Is there something that's going on that maybe, I just got off this phone with this really annoying prospect and it really bummed me out. It could be as small as that, but checking in with people like that to just get a temperature, because all the other things are probably fixable. But that is, I think, the easiest thing to fix is to work with someone's mindset. But it's the biggest missing piece, to your point, because people just don't ask.
Yeah, potentially easiest to fix, but also easiest to overlook or not even acknowledge or recognize.
100%.
So,
100%.
We often look at the success window is like, it's like the 30, 60, 90-day plan is often how like onboarding is done. So how do you envision that being structured, or is it not a 30, 60, 90-day plan?
I do think it is from a structured standpoint, because in sales, our client expectations are really high in when it comes to immediate needs and immediate results. But we have to set the expectation very clear with them. Say, listen, this is my analogy all the time. It's like we're cooking popcorn in a microwave. All right. If you take a bag of popcorn and you put it in a microwave, it takes 3 minutes to cook it. But it's actually a false statement. It takes 3 consistent minutes. If you take it out for 1 minute after you cook it and you inspect the bag and poke like holes in it and touch it and see what's going on, and you put it back in for another minute and do the same thing, take it out and check it, and then do it another minute, no kernels will pop. But you technically cooked it for 3 minutes. The problem is the consistency. So in our world, you have to really work in quarters, business quarters, 90 days. You have to do 3 minutes or 3 months of cooking the popcorn to see the popcorn start to pop. What we notice in the first month is fine tuning, is training, is coaching, is teaching them what to say when someone says something. 2, you're going to start seeing some kernels pop. Just like minute 2, you'll see some kernels pop in the microwave. But in the 3rd minute or the 3rd month, that's where fireworks start to happen. And you got to keep it. So you got to give it time. You got to obviously inspect, but don't just pause and say, okay, breaks up in the 45-day mark. And that's usually what I see happen.
This man is a master of the analogy, everybody. I love it. The popcorn, it's the kernels are starting to fire in month 2, but then the fireworks happen in month 3. It's great. So I do think within that first, second minute to carry through the comparison here, you probably would have some indications of if it's leading towards fireworks or not. So what are the things to pay attention to on if this person is going to work out? And would you ever let someone go before the 90 days are up?
The answer is yes, I would, because it could be a faulty microwave. Right. Just because, you know what I mean? Like what if one of the voltage is not right, or something popped, or there's a crossed wire in the microwave, and no matter how long you cook it for, I mean, we could have a fire here in a moment, right? Like this is a hazard. Like if you have someone like that, that would be absolutely bad. Someone who just doesn't have the right attitude, someone who is maybe just not catching on with the training, someone who just because they're swinging the bat doesn't mean it's working. They could be swinging the bat the opposite direction. So there definitely needs to be a short runway to see if that person is the right fit or not. But I do believe that you have to give it enough runway for those who you feel are on track and who are doing the right things, who are accepting the coaching, who are responding to your teaching, enough time to see, your results of the fruits of your labor. I had one guy, he had all the things. He had the grit. He sold gym memberships. So he was a hard background to do that. He actually had a brain tumor at a young age, and he was healed, and it really took him out of all of his college, and he lost his ability to play sports. I mean, he had a tough go. But because of that, he had grit, he had passion, he knew how to do hard things. He was willing to run through walls. He was grateful for life, literally. And so we hired him, we took a chance on him. And I remember walking into the office and I was like, where the heck is he? And he was under his desk making cold calls. He was so shy and embarrassed and scared that his friends were next to him would hear him on the phone, literally sitting under his desk making phone calls. And everyone's like, Gabe, what are you doing with this guy? Listen, he's got it. And just fast forward a year later, he was the #1 producer in the company for 2 years in a row. And so pretty cool story to see. But yeah, you got to give it time if, to your point, all the other mechanisms are working and operating correctly.
So on the other side of that would be, so that's like, hey, the microwave, quote unquote, is fine, and the person's succeeding because the microwave is good. Is there ever a inverse case where someone's actually performing well in spite of a faulty microwave? Like the the founder does not have their stuff together and yet, the seller does well? Or is that just like, don't ever bank on that being the case?
I mean, there's always exceptions to every rule. We had a client a couple of years ago. We sent them 182 leads in 90 days, and they didn't close one deal.
Mm.
And like I said before, they were really priced out of the market. A lot of the technology wasn't fully baked out. They were really, really early. And to your point earlier, the sales, the CEO was not really good at painting the vision and closing the deal. So you're going to have scenarios where it's great for maybe the salespeople, or it's great for the SDR, and maybe we're creating great leads on the front end, but the back end is broken. Like I said, this is an assembly line, right? Sales is an assembly line. You got marketing, you got impressions, you got content, you got interest, right? You got data, you got appointments, you got outreach, you got demos, and it goes to client success. Like, there is an assembly line to this entire process. So if you have a broken part on the assembly line, it's going to, of course, affect the whole result. But yeah, that's, I guess, my approach to it.
Yeah. So I guess then when, as Alleyoop, you're in a customer acquisition process yourself, but
right.
like on behalf of Alleyoop.
Yep.
But how do you identify like, if we take on this company, it's not going to go well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a unique approach about this. Not everyone agrees with me, but I think it's because of the people who I offend when I say this. But the number one tool, the number one asset, the number one thing that you can give a sales development or an account executive or a seller to have success is a great product to offer, a great solution, or a great tool that they're selling. Right? So the number one thing an SDR has is a great product. I've seen, and I know this for a fact because our reps work on different campaigns throughout their career here. They can work on one campaign for a year and then work on a second campaign in their second year, and they're totally different companies in every way. And that one great rep could crush it for one client and absolutely fail miserably for a second client. Mm-hmm. I think that's your question, right? How is that possible? And a huge reason for that is the product itself, right? So if you have a really good, irresistible offer, that is a huge differentiator for sure. So when we met with Discover.org when they were just getting started, and which turned into ZoomInfo, we said, wow, this is an amazing tool for salespeople. They would love to have accurate data on demand. And so when we assess our potential clients, to your point, our focus is really, do we get excited about this product? Like, can we do we like this? Is there an opportunity here for people to say, yeah, this is really cool, I want to take advantage of this? And if that's a yes, then we have to check all the rest of the formal boxes, but passionate about it is a really big thing for us to decide.
I'll give you one more question here before we hit our wrap up. I would say the most consistent answers when I'm speaking with investors about the most important founder trait that I'll hear from them is I hear some version of the word grit and some version of the word story, being a good storyteller. Most consistent, what investors will tell me they look for in a founder. What do you believe is the most important skill or trait for a salesperson to have?
Well, I mean, being a good founder is being a good salesperson, in my opinion. So the traits are almost identical to the two that you mentioned. And when I look for, I just did a call about this the other day. They asked me, like, what do you look for in the interview process? The number one thing is grit, consistently. You got to know, can you pick yourself up after you fall, right? The Bruce Wayne quote, right? From Dark Knight. Like, why do we fall, Bruce, right? To learn to pick ourselves back up.
You mean, you don't mean, where's the trigger?
Like, do you have that right at the end of the day? Like, that, not everyone does. If you're backed into the corner, do you come out swinging or do you fold? Like, that's the day. That's the question of the day. And you can't see that on a resume. You can't find that, on a cover letter. So you got to really get in there and ask tough questions to find great people, to our point about how we hire people. But I think that's just so true with salespeople too. You do need to be a good storyteller. You say I'm good at analogies. Yeah, I love sharing stories. I've shared many on this call. It's just who I am as a person. Yeah. But story selling is very much a part of it. People, I mean, look, why is Hollywood and entertainment such a huge business? People love a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So stop trying to sell them on facts and figures. My mentor said a long time ago, Gabe, facts tell, stories sell. So that's how I approach sales. And so just be authentic, be real, be casual, but also share great stories and work your friggin' face off.
Gabe, where can our listeners find you? Where can they learn more about you and Alleyoop?
I'm bullish on LinkedIn. You know, we post every day. We give away a ton of free content. We're very transparent. And if you ever, like to connect, shoot me a DM and we'll definitely chat.
We didn't really touch on it, but I mentioned you are also the host of the Do Hard Things podcast. Where can listeners find that and what can they expect out of that show?
Yeah, all the channels, wherever you get your podcast, dohardthings.io will forward you right to the show as well on YouTube. But we're on all the channels, and the show really, Do Hard Things is the concept. And the reason why is, as I said earlier, right? Most people don't get into sales because they graduated with a degree in sales. They find their way into this, and then they become either really successful or not. So we figured out, let's meet with the people who are really successful and let's ask them, how the heck did they get there? And it's much more of a more personalized versus tactical show. And we did that by design, and that's who we like to look for.
Who is one person who's been helpful to you on your professional journey that you want to give a shout out to?
Well, he's no longer living, so I don't know if I can do that, but it's a recommendation. The guy name is Jim Rohn. I've read all of his books, listened to all his shows. He's an old guy. He passed away in 2009, and he taught me just a lot. He's also the same guy who coached Darren Hardy and Tony Robbins, if that gives you some ideas. Mm-hmm. But he has amazing amounts of words, and he says, don't be lazy in language. So like I said earlier, when I was 11, I said, words can actually make me money. This is incredible. And so he's really good at communicating and teaching people how to do so.
Shout out to the grave, Jim Rohn. We'll now give our top one or two lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on the discussion today. I'll go first and I'll toss it to you. The topic today was how to make it nearly impossible for your sales hire to fail. We covered a lot of really good ground. What I will come back to is it is still your job as the founder to be a salesperson, even when you're hiring someone else for the job.
Yeah. So you want me to go on what my takeaway was, my biggest takeaway from the show? I think the biggest thing that I shared so far is that story of grit, right? And I think it's been thematic throughout the entire show here, is that you want to find people who are willing to push through the limits. And I'll end with this. We hired somebody who was a former basketball coach and a police officer. And that was her resume when she came to the interview. And I said, why the heck am I looking at this interview? And after that interview, she got hurt on the job as a police officer, so she couldn't be a police officer anymore. And the story that she had about how that all happened was massively powerful. Right now, fast forward, she's one of our best SDRs on our sales floor today. And that was her background. So just look for that grit, and I think everything else can be trained. And I think that's super important takeaway.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show. Fill in the blank, Gabe. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Worth it.
Well said. And I don't even think you need to expand on that. Entrepreneurship is worth it. I love it. He is Gabe Lullo. Now, everybody, if you were listening to this and you were like, ooh, that was a good point he made, but I have a follow-up question. That's interesting. I want to give you a chance to pass the rock to Gabe yourself, to continue the Alleyoop analogy here. Gabe is going to be hopping into our online member community, the Goat to Market Club. And the whole first week this episode is live, he's going to be doing a Reddit-style Ask Me Anything. So if you want to ask him a little bit more about some of those hiring practices and employee success practices, you can ask him that. If you want to dig into why he's picked Scottie Pippen over Michael Jordan, you can ask him that. If you want him to unpack grit just a little bit more, or ask him for his top restaurant recommendations in Buffalo, it's all fair game because it's an Ask Me Anything. The whole first week this episode is live. You can access that Ask Me Anything by joining the Goat to Market Club yourself. It is free to join. Go to startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Gabe, we will see you inside of the AMA and GTM Club. Thank you once again for joining us today on Startup Hype Man's Goat to Market Show.
Thank you.
That'll put a bow on this one. Before we head out of here, a couple quick housekeeping items. Number one, did you like what you heard? Well, give us a subscribe and a follow. Maybe share it with one friend who you think would find this valuable. Number two, remember that Ask Me Anything I told you about at the end of the episode? That goes down exclusively inside of Goat to Market Club, our online founder and startup community. And you can access it for free. Membership is 100% free at startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Number three, need pitch help? Startup Hype Man is your man. Whether it's a fundraising narrative or a go-to-market or category narrative, we've got you covered to make sure you have messaging that doesn't help you just go to market, but of course what? Helps you become the GOAT to market. All right, we will see you next week here on the Goat to Market Show. Thank you for listening. And remember, why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT?